Good evening from Kyiv. I am Josh Friedman. I am joined on this special election night broadcast by Nick Demydiuk. Nick, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
How are you on this interesting evening?
It is definitely great evening, great day in Kiev, and so people are enjoying their weekend, and looks like they not don't care much about today's election, but today is a very important day in Ukrainian politics. So it's an important day for the future of Ukraine. That's why I would like to discuss it today. I hope.
We will be discussing the election and the future of Ukraine in depth in this election night special, and I'll be asking you to introduce yourself momentarily to the audience. But first, we have some results to deliver to you. As I was saying earlier today in my election day broadcast, it was a runoff election between incumbent President Petro Poroshenko and challenger Volodymyr Zelensky, who is actually a comedian and actor who played the role of a teacher who became president of Ukraine on television. And tonight, based on the results we have, Zelensky is indeed going to become the next president of Ukraine. He is winning in a landslide victory. The latest figures we have from exit polls are what? About 73% for Zelensky?
Yes, that's right. 73% for Zelensky and 25.5% for Poroshenko. And it's the exit polls that were processed at the moment of 10 p.m. Kyiv time.
The official results are not going to be in for a while, but it's all said and done with with the kind of exit poll like that. It prompted an immediate concession speech out of Poroshenko, which we watched some of it, and it was a bit of a combative speech. It seemed from my vantage point, but you understood it better than me.
Yeah, it was it was some kind of speech where Poroshenko acknowledged his defeat, and he told the audience, his supporters, his team, the whole nation who watched this live. He told that he's going to continue fighting for Ukraine, supporting Ukraine, protecting Ukraine. So he plans to do it in within the Verkhovna Rada, Ukrainian parliament, to do that. So,
Which on that really quickly, Poroshenko has his own political party,
yeah, that's
correct?
right. Yes, political party is one of the major parties on in the current parliament, and Ukraine also expects the other parliamentary election, which are scheduled to be either in the end of the year or in the beginning of next year. So at least we have almost at least half a year before the next campaign starts. I mean, campaign for the parliamentary election, and I believe that some forces are planning to prepare for it just right away, just after the results of the parliamentary election, especially those ones who didn't pass into the second round.
For whoever's joining us, thank you very much for joining us on this live broadcast. The live stream is something, it's a new feature on this channel, but I'm going to try to incorporate more in situations like this. If you've got comments or questions, please feel free to chime in on that matter really quickly, just for our international audience, so they have some understanding. Let's just clear up what the political system here is. There's a president, but there's also a parliament. What are the powers of the president? And
Well,
what
Ukraine is a parliamentary presidential republic, and it has it has one chamber parliament, which is elected every 5 years,
and it's called the Verkhovna Rada.
Verkhovna Rada is essentially is the place where it takes part, and is also the official name of the Ukrainian parliament, and it is scheduled to be, just as I mentioned before, somewhere around the end of this year.
The election, the parliamentary election.
Yes, I mean the parliamentary election.
So Mr. Zelensky is coming to power out of nowhere, seemingly. Does he have a party? Does he have a team? Does he have what kind of political infrastructure does he have?
Well, I can't tell that unexpectedly Zelensky is a celebrity, is a popular person in Ukraine and well-known person in Ukraine, even outside Ukraine, and he definitely has some media resources. So he has his own comedy show, just which is broadcasted just almost well, at least several days a week, and he definitely has he had his own TV series, which I would call The Servant of People, where by the story the president, the school teacher became the president of Ukraine, and seems like that people voted for this. For this person. I mean the character, but on the Zelensky himself, because Zelensky himself so far didn't show his to the whole extent of his. Views on the future. Even though today concessional speech, he told that he's going to protect every single Ukrainian in the country.
In Zelensky's victory speech.
Yes, so it was Zelensky victory speech, and what is interesting that his first speech was made just live from the via the social networks, unlike the Poroshenko's, because Poroshenko used the standard press, big press conference. So it still and shows that Zelensky used a very unique and unique means of his own political advertising, just using the social media, using the TV media, of course, but the social media and young people, many of those supported Zelensky, and they also support his media personality.
Okay, we'll get much more into Zelensky later on in this live broadcast, but I want to take a step back now. So if we go back 5 years, a little more than 5 years, there was a very major event here in Ukraine, specifically here in Kyiv, that I think you witnessed firsthand, and I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that. That being Euromaidan, which ousted pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych and ultimately led to Poroshenko rising to power. And why don't you share with the audience a little bit of your experience from those dramatic times here?
I can assure any viewers abroad that this was the event that essentially, showed all the vulnerability and all the problems of on the world politics, world international relations. So it was perhaps one of the biggest achievements of Maidan. So it showed all the people. I mean, it showed Ukrainian problems for Ukrainians. It showed the world problems for the world audience, and also rose lots of questions within the European Union about the future of the European Union. But Maidan itself was a great place for communication. So it became something
Were you out there on the square during
Yes, I visited it, and of course I participated during the December. During the December time, a little bit of January, and I was not present just on 18th and 20th when 100 people died, but I still was present on Maidan on 19th of February 2014, helping out people. So it was Maidan was unique in terms of Ukraine, because Ukrainian society is just atomized and separated by various things, and the overall level of the quality of life does not help that much to for people to communicate. And
okay, hold on 1 second, because I want us to take the audience on the journey of the past 5 years. So Maidan happened, there was craziness, people died, it brought Poroshenko to power, and there were high expectations. And what has transpired over the past 5 years that has led to this day in which Poroshenko gets trounced and an actor and comedian wins the vote?
The answer is pretty simple. The first one is that all the necessary reforms were not complete. only very few of them complete, and even they are not finalized. For instance, the reform of National Police of Ukraine, the new institution, which had to replace the old Soviet-style militia and police unit, law enforcement unit. And of course, there were huge victories on international relations. So Ukraine gathered the front of support, but the problem was that internal policy were completely lost by Poroshenko.
And what do you mean? What went wrong with
Well,
internal
I'm
policy?
saying about the lack of reforms, number one. Number two is lots of controversial cases against his team and his administration, corruption. And the third one, Poroshenko lost the communication with people, with the nation. So people started, people felt that Poroshenko is, they didn't feel Poroshenko is their president, and and also Poroshenko used lots of power of social media by bloggers, by various bloggers, which became not only the integrating, mobilizing people during the 2014-15 when people were really a bit in panic, but after all, starting from 2016, it turned into one of his propaganda sources, and there is still no certainty on whether it was made voluntarily, or was it paid by his administration, which is also one of the theories that exists in Ukraine. And all these losses brought the popularity of Zelensky and some other alternative politicians who didn't won this election, but Zelensky made it just through and through. So people mostly voted not for Zelensky but against Poroshenko. So Zelensky became someone who is against the all the old system.
They were casting a protest vote.
Yeah,
And
it was definitely a protest vote.
You and I, we were doing some field research yesterday. We were out on the
did.
Maidan, walking around, talking to people, asking who they're supporting, and I think we got a fairly decent picture from talking to them about what are the prevailing sentiments. And there were some people who said they're not voting at all, and I haven't seen any of the turnout figures, by the way. Have you seen is the turnout, the voter turnout, how many people voted?
I saw it something like it was 2.5%, just spoiled the ballot, something like that. So and the average average attendance is still around 65%, and first exit poll showed it is even higher than the first round. So people actually showed up and voted for the candidate they thought who is appropriate for this for the next 5 years.
Which actually, I guess it's worth mentioning that Ukraine's been receiving a lot of praise for this election. A lot of people saying that this is an example of a very free and fair election in part of the world where that's not so common. And I don't seem to have a whole lot of reason to question that. Do you?
Well, I think people are right in this respect, and perhaps these particular elections, both first round, the second round, despite the very nasty media campaign around the candidates, the process itself, the process of voting of election, was perhaps the most transparent and the best, starting from the second Ukrainian in the period of independence, which started in 1991. But the first one was 1917, the Ukrainian People's Republic. So perhaps since starting from 1991, it was these were the best elections. So essentially, in a nutshell, people decided to oust Poroshenko. And they did it without any problems, without any manipulations. So they just did it. And
Okay, so let's delve into that. So yesterday, while we were walking around the Maidan, asking people who they're supporting and why, when we were discussing it with the Zelensky supporters, they were mostly saying that they've got problems with Poroshenko, they've got problems with the economy,
yeah.
but they didn't seem to have much of a reason for why
Yeah.
they wanted Zelensky other than a protest vote against Poroshenko.
Yeah, so it definitely was a protest vote, and it is also worth was telling that uh, essentially Zelensky's campaign was built was intended to involve as much categories of Ukrainian society as they could. So they gathered lots of people from lots of political views, lots of social status. With
What are some of the different groups
for instance, people.
or demographic groups?
I mean, demographic groups are very different. So these are, of course, people who have some kind of still live in, in Soviet mindset and Soviet identity.
By that, do you mean people who are primarily Russian speakers? What do you mean?
Not well. Mostly these people.
Older
speak,
people.
So these people mostly speak Russian, yes, but it's not the entire rule because it's much deeper problem. And so these were people speaking different languages, had different views on the war and problems that we have in Ukraine, about solving these problems. So it was definitely the humiliating loss by Poroshenko, because Poroshenko could not organize these people. So despite the fact that Poroshenko built his campaign around the army, about protection of Ukrainian culture, and his victories on the external relations, which are really great. So Ukraine got a visa free regime with Schengen countries, Schengen states. Ukraine also got a strong front against the Moscow aggression, against Moscow propaganda. Is also a great achievement, and on this respect, so Poroshenko got some built his campaign. And of course, the independent Ukrainian Orthodox Church was also one of the important questions of every country's independence, because
on that note, it's something I actually previewed a bit on this channel back a year and a half ago. I interviewed. But hold on a sec. I just want to cue the audience in. You want to explain what the autocephaly is?
Well, yeah, essentially.
And by the way, what's this? What's this church we have in the background?
So the church we have in the background is a great painting on the wall. It is the Sophia Cathedral, which is located in
just up the hill from where we're sitting right now.
From where we're sitting. And so in a nutshell, it means the Ukrainian Independent Orthodox Church, which is also, and this particular church right now is perhaps approved and recognized by the Constantinople Patriarch.
The Ukrainian, formerly in the Orthodox world, the Ukrainian Church was part of the Russian Church.
Oh, and yes,
that changed very recently.
Yeah, it changed last year, and it caused, this was one of the sources of anti-Ukrainian propaganda for killing the Orthodox Church, coming from Moscow, obviously. But at the same time, the people didn't care much about this, so they,
Okay, yeah, that's a question of mine. So you're listing a few achievements of Poroshenko's. I think visa-free travel to the EU, probably everyone is happy about that. But
I think yes.
But the church, you're saying people don't care so much, or what?
I mean, yeah, because as Jose Casanovich, who is the well-known American scientist who studies the religion affairs in various countries in the world. He praises Ukraine for being very liberal on this matter and being and even keeping the secularity that came from the Soviet Union. People still have enough freedom to express their religion beliefs. So, on this matter, it is a great victory, but still, I believe, it was not articulated well by Poroshenko and his team. So I think it is also the loss on the information front. I mean, internal information front against. I mean, it's not against, but on the internal information field. Yeah. So and
What about economic achievements or lack
well,
thereof? Have things
well,
gotten better for people? Are people making more money than 5 years ago? Not at all. Is that why they're voting for
it is
Zelensky?
complicated. To be honest, throughout these, at least throughout the last 100 years, Ukraine has never been a rich country, and even after 1991, there was no single period of time when Ukraine was at least as wealthy as Poland or some other countries. So in this respect, people wanted some changes on the economic matter, and mostly it goes to the liberal economic reforms of deregulation, privatization, economic freedom, tax liberalization. But it doesn't happen. I mean, it doesn't happen to it does it did happen to some extent. Well, some regulations were really cancelled. And new electronic governance started working, not only whole set of state services, but it's still today the Ministry of Justice just allowed lots of their services doing online, and people got the opportunity to file their tax reports online, both individuals and companies. So
Is that something that affects
this-
people's bottom line? Are they making any more money because of that? Are the salaries higher?
So that's what I'm talking about. It definitely was not enough, and economic reforms is a huge number of issues around it. So mostly the issue is the issue of the power of Ukrainian oligarchs who are not interested in economic reforms at all. So we're talking that Poroshenko is an oligarch as well. He has companies. He's a billionaire, but we're talking about the other oligarchs, and they definitely didn't like even these achievements. I mean, achievements and confronting these oligarchs even on very small fronts. But
One of these oligarchs, Kolomoisky, will be getting into in a few minutes. But carry on, please.
yeah, so people definitely didn't get better reforms, and some reforms that could definitely work just at once if they were done. Should they be done?
Are a lot of these people voting out of frustration over their financial state?
I think some of those people do, because Ukraine still has lots of economical constraints, such as and to summarize it all up in one sentence, it's all about state. Involvement of state or government into economic sphere. So that is all the same problem, and all the experts starting from 2014 told a lot about to government that we definitely should that Ukraine should solve this problem, and it wasn't done. And by the way, Zelensky promises that his team is going to do this. Well, let's see. It will be interesting to watch.
We'll get in depth into Zelensky very quickly, or very soon, but very quickly.
So answering your question, yes, people voted from depression. People voted for as a frustration to what they don't have, and for what they for what didn't happen.
Now, why did some people, 23, how much did Poroshenko get? 25%? What's the latest figure?
Yeah, 25%.
Okay, so who are these 25%, and why are they voting to re-elect Poroshenko?
Well, these 25.5% are people who are deeply who understand the difficulties of Ukraine, who understand that despite the uh, completely disastrous losses on the internal policy. Ukraine has external policy and very clear vision of its protection, of what to do and how to relate with foreign countries, and so these people mostly voted for this. Also, it goes for the protection of Ukrainian culture as well. So these people also gave their votes to Poroshenko. So because on these issues, I mean on these topics, Zelensky is not very clear, and that's why people could not trust him his their votes. They decided to vote for Poroshenko, and voting for Poroshenko meant that at least despite his losses in his political activity, people still understood people understand what to wait from him. What will it be? And I can tell you what it will be. Neither of the candidates, neither of the candidates are really planning to change a lot, despite, regardless of what Zelensky is telling right now about his team, that they are going to make great reforms, but it is very doubtful. I can tell you, I can assure you this with my knowledge of Ukrainian politics.
Hold that thought for a few minutes. Let's dive right into this now. Who is Zelensky? What do we know about him?
Well, who is Zelensky? Zelensky is an actor. He's a comedian. He started as a comedian something around 15 years ago or something. So he's very long, and right now he has his own production company, his own show.
Kvartal.
Yes,
Kvartal.
Yeah, quarter 95, kvartal 95. So this is his project.
His production company.
It is a production company. They produce movies mostly comedy movies, and so that's his main occupation.
So he's also a businessman. He's not just a comedian and an actor.
Well, he's definitely a businessman, and rather successful one, I would like to add. And but at the same time we have to understand that he's definitely some kind of political project anyway, so we'll talk about it later, I hope.
He's someone's political project?
Well, let's be honest, almost every single politician in Ukraine is a political project. So I think perhaps maybe for excluding Poroshenko, but still Poroshenko has his own resources, has his own media. So he made the political project from himself.
Okay, who is Kolomoisky? Who is Igor Kolomoisky?
Well, Igor Kolomoisky is one of the largest oligarchs here in Ukraine. He owns the key strategic organizations, and namely,
what does he own?
Namely, he has direct influence into state-owned Ukrainian oil company Ukrnafta, which has oil rigs, which gets oil in Ukraine, and he is very active around this state company. So it is actually a normal practice in corrupt Ukrainian business around that oligarchs come to state enterprises to get some money from the budget by different schemes. As a normal practice was founded a long time ago.
To get money from the state budget.
Yes, definitely it's from state budget. And Kolomoisky also has had lots of arguments and issues with some other stakeholders in this. The stakeholders, the government, and it was the huge crisis. And also Kolomoisky owns the largest Ukrainian airline, Ukraine International Airlines. Is also, well, he doesn't own this directly. He owns it through two Cyprus business entities. So it's also normal practice for Ukrainian business and for every single oligarch's normal thing. And he also involved into various industrial companies who work with metal, work with the chemical production. So in this case, so on this issue, they also he also rivals with Dmitro Firtash, who is also the Ukrainian oligarch. So
He's
he's
got assets across a whole variety of
yes,
industries.
and right now he wants his comeback to Ukraine because right now he's in Israel and he's sitting in Israel because here in Ukraine he has criminal prosecution against him on a private bank case which was nationalized in the end of 2016, and he is convicted. He is charged of fraud of stealing at least $5 billion from there.
All right, so what is the relationship, as far as we know, between Zelensky and Kolomoisky?
Well, number one, Zelensky is perhaps one of the biggest occupants of his TV channel 1+1 group, and
1+1 is owned by.
1+1 is also the TV channel that is owned by Kolomoisky, and it is also normal practice because almost all oligarchs have in the media in Ukraine. It's not only paper media, but also not only TV media, but also they are holding some paper media as well. And this relation number one. Relation number two is that Kolomoisky's lawyers were involved in Zelensky's campaign, and they were noted. So they were spotted just together with Zelensky, and it's definitely the relation with him and Zelensky's.
There are allegations that Zelensky is merely a puppet of Kolomoisky. What is your take on that?
I think that this theory has lots of true background, considering what I mentioned before, and so definitely Kolomoisky and a set of other oligarchs who lost something from the war, lost something from new measures by Poroshenko's administration. They want some kind of revenge, and some of the oligarchs, they even try to go abroad, so like Viktor Pinchuk, who published an article in Wall Street Journal in January of 2017 on how to solve the Ukrainian crisis. So to be short, he proposes the Western audience, the Western business elites, to find some to surrender to Russia. Surrender to Russia and get back economic relations with Russia, and for the West not to be involved into Ukrainian issues. So it was one of the perhaps the major
Okay, but
perils of Ukrainian oligarchs who didn't want any involvement of external parties, because
wasn't Kolomoisky very involved in the fight against the advance of the separatists backed by Russia into eastern Ukraine?
From Kolomoisky did a great thing in this respect. So he protected the Dnipro region against the.
What he had his own militia, or he funded.
Yes, so he was definitely involved in the Ukrainian conflict on Ukrainian side. So he supported Ukrainian militia, supported Ukrainian military as well. State military. So he just granted the free.
Okay,
we're getting comments about unrelated Balkan issues.
Sure.
Continue on.
So he also granted the permission for Ukrainian army to refuel on his network of refueling stations throughout Ukraine for free without any charge. He also organized some campaign for bringing the separatists to justice and getting a reward, which is the reward was something like 10,000. Well, not something like this. What? $10,000 per person. So I don't know whether it was really paid or not, but it was a great media. It got great media coverage in that time, and people. Really
all right. So, but bringing things back, there have been allegations thrown around that if Zelensky were to come to power, then this might be a win for Russia. So
Well,
how did we get from the point of
Well-
Kolomoisky, this oligarch who may or may not be behind Zelensky, fighting Russia, to now Zelensky is the candidate that Putin and Russia are supposedly supporting? How did we get there?
Well, Kolomoisky mostly cares about the Ukrainian field because Ukraine is a great area of operations for Kolomoisky and other oligarchs because with their way of doing business here within the economic structure of monopolization of several dedicated areas, spheres of Ukrainian economy, Kolomoisky is interested in come back and control it all over again. So his sentiments against Moscow, they have only business issue because Kolomoisky understands that unlike Akhmetov, who definitely supported Moscow on the west in the very beginning, unlike Akhmetov, Kolomoisky understands that if Ukraine falls into Moscow orbit, he's gonna lose all his business, and so will other oligarchs because Russian oligarchs are much more greedier. They have a very strong enforcement for that, and they are supported by Kremlin. So that's the point. And so right now he's not interested by Russia, and Zelensky specifically made lots of sentiments on getting in peace agreement with Russia, which in a nutshell are almost the same. So get to peace by any price, but this price actually.
What has he hasn't said a whole lot as far as I understand, but what has Zelensky actually said about Russia, about the war in the East? What has he actually said?
Well, Zelensky. We know that Crimea is Ukrainian.
We're getting some comments.
Yeah,
I mean, feel free to if the comments are related, please chime in.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
But stuff related to Thessaloniki, that can wait for another day.
About Ukraine, so Zelensky said that he stands for returning all the occupied territories. And to be honest, it's not. We don't know.
What does he mean by that?
That's what he states. He doesn't tell any details. That's the specifics of his campaign. He doesn't tell anything certain.
That's been
unlike Poroshenko.
A critique of his campaign has been that Zelensky has not made very many clear policy statements. Okay, but continue on. What has he said about Russia? What do we know about him in Russia?
He says that first of all, he was deeply involved in the Russian media business prior to war and even after the war. So,
as in media operations in Russia?
Yes. So he is claimed to have campaigns registered in Russia, and even some Russian government institutions funded some of his TV projects. It's not right now. I cannot give the details because I don't know enough of them.
Is that true? I don't want to be.
But
I don't want to be making a claim if it's not true. But
I'm to be honest, I'm not sure either. But at the same time, he is deeply involved in this ex-USSR Russian-speaking market. So he wants to return in and have much more audience. About the question.
Either the question is sort of related, sort of not.
Sort of not, yeah. And so also Zelensky sees Russia as the so-called brother country, which is brothers with the Ukrainians, and we have to.
Are those his words?
These were his words during already after 2014, despite the fact that he didn't work directly with Russia since that time. He still was involved into that. Also, some of his consultants, namely his chief consultant Petro Poroshenko, who is the head of his campaign, said that we have to find some new means of communication in Russia, so that we have to find some means, some ways to cease fire and bring Russia. Also, the other factor is that Russian propaganda definitely supports Zelensky. So they say that Poroshenko is a total loser, and Ukraine is losing with Poroshenko. So you have to, so Ukrainians that Sicily Ukrainian
I've been following the Russian media somewhat during this campaign, and
So-
the Russian media, state media, is against Poroshenko. That's clear. But the question a lot of people have been asking is, can we really jump to the conclusion that Zelensky is good for Russia? How do we not
Well-
know that once he takes
Well,
office, he might
I
take
can-
a very strong stance against Russia?
Well, I mean that people in his campaign staff who are doing his campaign, some of them have really have sentiments on building new connections with Russia, while getting to peace with Russia, by not saying how, but saying into peace. So they are actually saying.
All right. Well, let's try to analyze
The problem
that.
is that-
Let's try to analyze that. If they do want to throw out an olive branch to Russia, what does that mean? Does that mean completely giving up on Donetsk and Lugansk, or what is?
Well, it definitely means losing the territories, because the territories are going to be separate. Second one is that they may agree for so-called federalization, which is definitely a Moscow project. The idea is to make some kind of Bosnia scenario when the country is constantly separated and has those so-called republics and terrorist organizations have representation in the government. They may have representation in the parliament, and in these scenarios, Ukraine definitely gonna become a failed state just in moments, because there is actually nothing holding it anymore. So at the same time, some of the people actually support ceasefire by any price, and the problem is that
What's if your position? If there's a ceasefire, you think Russia would not follow it at all, and
I mean,
the fighting would rage on, or what do you think?
I'll tell you what, there can be only two ways of ceasefire, and finishing the conflict. The number one, the simplest one, and what all the parties who want to return us back as it was, they all say that Ukraine has to stop confronting Russia and stop defending itself. And that's essentially what they want. But in that, by that mean, Ukraine gonna lose, and perhaps gonna, even saving the formal sovereignty, Ukraine gonna lose gonna lose the for matter for being, and of course Russia gonna convict people who fought against Russia, against Moscow, gonna convict them. They're gonna prosecute them, and the government that will be formed by Moscow directly gonna give them away back to Moscow, and they all will be sent to prisons for life sentences, just like Sentsov and other people who were captured by Russia. So and number two is actually continuing the way it is now, even though Minsk agreements are not the best option right now, but Minsk agreements are because Minsk agreements were never fulfilled. They were never fulfilled till the moment of their signing, because people were still dying, people were still in the process of war. So, and there were operation in Debaltseve in 2015. There were also some activity in 2016. So it definitely not going to change. But at the same time, the sanction mechanism is linked to the Minsk agreements.
Okay, we need to start wrapping things up. Although I did just see a comment saying, "What did I miss?" If you're just tuning in now, thank you for joining us, but we're almost 45 minutes in, so you missed quite a bit. I guess the immediate update is that Volodymyr Zelensky, the comedian, actor, businessman, the man who plays a president on TV, has been elected president of Ukraine resoundingly. He's won in a landslide with apparently more than 70% of the vote, according to the exit polls. Poroshenko, his presidency, he will not be getting a new presidency. And how about we start wrapping things up by saying, well, what do you see happening now? What's going to play out over the next 5 years in Ukraine?
Well, in conclusion, I'd like to say that
what does Zelensky stand for? That's something we're trying to figure out ourselves.
the point I can answer this question. Zelensky stands for right now. Zelensky stands for that he is saying nothing. So he is actually saying nothing on key topics, and people who are infuriated with Poroshenko, people are supporting him just because he's saying nothing. He's
Zelensky's made some points, but he hasn't given a whole lot to back it up and to give us any clarity about his policies.
Yes, definitely. And
what do you see going forward? What's going to happen over the next 5 years? I can tell you
that from what I see, from my knowledge, studying Ukrainian politics long before Maidan, and of course during the last 5 years. None of the candidates were really planning to make internal reforms. Despite the fact that Zelensky has a great team, as they showed us, there will be no reforms within Ukraine. This is something that we should definitely take as fact.
What do you mean by no reforms?
I mean that everything gonna remain as it is now, with the tons of unfinished business.
No major economic reforms, no major judicial reforms, no major administrative reforms.
No major economic reforms, no major judicial reform, despite the fact that they are promising it. So there will be...
We're at an event where some of his team members, not very high up, but some team members were speaking, and they're promising independent judiciary as a core value of his.
Independent judiciary is definitely a core value, but
of Zelensky's. Anyway, so what do you see happening? No reforms. So what happens?
So nothing going to change in the internal policy, but on
economic stagnation.
Let me tell first,
okay,
please.
Go for it.
On the external politics, there are tons of issues and tons of risks. So right now, no one is certain about Zelensky's external policy, and it means the front of support in Ukraine, the front of confronting Moscow in its aggression, which is definitely serious, and those guys, despite the fact that they're trying to calm the things down, they still are trying to confront the entire world. It's the Moscow's idea of confronting the whole world. It's still alive. So right now we are not sure what Zelensky is going to do with that, and having this, so this is one of the biggest concerns about Zelensky and his future program. So the only thing I can tell about that is that we have to watch him carefully and see what he's going to do. Anyway, there will be also as the second part of the internal policy, there will be the partial revenge of all the oligarchs, all forces who are gonna return completely into political system.
So Kolomoisky is physically coming back here from Israel?
Yeah. So and not only Kolomoisky. Essentially, the Zelensky is supported by a range of forces, of oligarch forces. So I can definitely tell that Viktor Pinchuk supports Zelensky to some extent, and Dmitro Fitter, some other oligarchs who either got under the U.S. sanctions, who got under the prosecution of Ukrainian judiciary system and prosecution system. So they definitely were gonna return, and they are definitely planning to return with revenge and with vengeance. And they are going to do that, and parliamentary election is going to happen. So this is one of the key risks as I see it right now.
So you're quite pessimistic about the Zelensky administration.
I'm not pessimistic. I'm just realistic, and I just know what Ukrainian politics is and how it is made. I'm not, perhaps I don't know for 100%, but I definitely can assure our viewers that there are huge issues standing in front of Ukraine, and one of those, and the problem is that uh, Ukraine has lots of existential problems. So I mean existential by Ukraine exists in its country, so Ukraine has lots of problems in its economy, and I can assure every viewer that with any mistake that Zelensky can make, Zelensky gonna lose lots of his support, because most of his support right now is the emotional support against Poroshenko. When they see that Zelensky is doing nothing, they're gonna all cut back, and Zelensky gonna stay with the very little rating. And it is really possible without any manipulations or without any media campaign against dirty campaign against Zelensky, just because people will get disappointed very fast.
Well, I can attest to the fact that today's vote was largely a protest vote, and I think a lot of the points you're making make a lot of sense. It's a very difficult political landscape to navigate here, as we see by Poroshenko's rapid fall, at least in terms of his presidential popularity. Any last thoughts as we wrap up Election Day and Election Night 2019 here in Kyiv?
I can, in final, I would like to tell every viewer that Zelensky is goes with the same line as Trump and European populists in terms of building their campaigns, in terms of using the media, and definitely Poroshenko is the new. I mean, it is a new challenge considering the media problems of the beginning of the century. They are the post-truth, the blurring the truth, blurring the facts.
It's very postmodern that there's
So-
someone playing a president on television and now
So
he's
it's
the president.
it is, as long as the world society stands on the border between modernism, modernity, and postmodernity. This is entirely the perhaps were the postmodern campaign, and there are lots of issues in that matter, because unfortunately, Ukraine still has no. I mean, control of its informational field by Ukrainians, not only by government, but by Ukrainians. So it is easy to bring fakes in Ukraine, to bring dirty media campaigns, and there's something that worked against Poroshenko, and there were lots of attacks on Poroshenko. Most of them were definitely false. Just like the Poroshenko is an alcoholic, it was one of the biggest popular fake news, but it's definitely absolutely fake, because Poroshenko has problem with diabetes. He's not allowed to consume alcohol at all. But people believe that Poroshenko is drunk on his public meetings.
It's
So it is.
politics.
And it was brought just from Moscow. It was brought from inside, by people who hated Poroshenko, and I can tell you that this hatred just was canalized into Zelensky's choice. So people elected Zelensky just only on emotions against Poroshenko, and I think that people gonna see the consequence pretty soon.
My impression is that you're not actually an ardent supporter of Poroshenko, but I understand that you have a lot of skepticism about this.
I can assure the viewers that working in
For the interruption, we are back.
Yeah.
Apologies. We're just wrapping this up. We had a minor technical
Yeah,
interruption, but we're just gonna wrap this thing up.
So I was saying that I'm definitely constant opposition of the system that was the system of institutions, the system of the system of politics that was inherited from Ukrainian SSR, from USSR time, and definitely I was in opposition to Poroshenko, despite the fact that he'd done some good things. And so the same goes here. So I have no illusions. Because I understand that it will be very difficult for someone to change. And for me, sometimes it seems to me that the system in Ukraine is really unchangeable. Sometimes I think so, but I don't know. And
I'll give my impression. It seems like a lot has been accomplished in bringing the country to where there's it's a pretty vibrant electoral atmosphere, as we were saying before, pretty fair, pretty free. Yet at the same time, I'm seeing a lot of frustration. Seems like it's been a very divisive election, but
Any election is divisive.
well, this one seems pretty divisive, but more so than that, there's just continuous frustration, and that has a lot to do with everything you're discussing. There are a lot of problems that have been here for a long time, and they're going to remain.
So that's what I'm saying, that people gonna understand the consequence pretty soon. And Zelensky Zelensky in such a situation, he definitely has no right has no right to fail. So because if he fails, despite the problem that Ukraine doesn't have the system of impeachment, so we have impeachment only in our constitution, but we don't have the law that prescribes how the president can be impeached. And this is one of the biggest constitutional issues for Ukraine, not having the system of impeachment.
That's interesting, but you do have a system, you have a de facto system of impeachment, and it's right outside of
Yes,
the Maidan.
The problem is that right now Ukraine has almost no resources and not enough people, not enough energy to make it once more. And because many people died on these, many people migrated from Ukraine during these 5 years, and there is no real source of that, because many people voted for Zelensky. They definitely won't just come out on the streets if something happens. I'm almost sure on this, because there are very little people who have some ideology and principles.
You're saying that Zelensky runs the risk of losing the popular support.
He definitely runs it.
However, there's probably not a big risk of a new Maidan or some major uprising against Zelensky.
I can tell you that I think within at least 1.5 2 years, there's almost no resource for that, even no chance for that. But Ukraine will have lots of problems. So in 2020, Ukraine has to pay at least $5 billion on credits that Ukraine got from international institutions, namely IMF, World Bank. They are from European financial institutions, and it's definitely gonna make problems with the Ukrainian national currency, and people definitely not gonna like it, and people gonna blame Zelensky for that.
All right, but there are definitely problems ahead. We're running up on an hour-long broadcast. Really quickly, if anyone in the audience has any questions, feel free to ask them right now. We're going to wrap this up.
Let's read what they have already.
I've been keeping track of a lot of the questions and comments have been a bit off topic. I'll be back in the Balkans soon enough. We can talk Balkans on this channel plenty. Maybe we'll do some Balkan live streams. But I'll be back in the Balkans. Don't worry about that. But I once again apologize for this little technical glitch right before the end of this broadcast. If you don't have any questions right now, then we're just gonna call it a wrap. I'll give you like a couple more seconds. And in the meanwhile, Nick, I could throw it in the description below if you have something now to share. Is there anywhere people can find you, or is that for a later date?
I'm very interesting person in this matter, because I don't use social media that much.
What's the national drink? Are we drinking one of the national drinks?
Well, I think that the national drink of Ukraine is actually horilka, which is vodka, yeah. I think perhaps it is national drink.
What specifically is horilka?
Well, horilka is just vodka is just done different. To be honest, I have no real idea on this matter.
It's the same drink, different name?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. Maybe it also perhaps done a little bit differently than Russian vodka, but it is the national drink and one of the most popular. But still, there are also, I think that this one can be named as drink number one. But most young people in Ukraine, they don't drink that much, to be honest, and they mostly prefer beer and wines. So this this vodka culture is not it is in Ukraine, from at least from among the young people which are under 35 years old, it is not as popular as in Russia. So that's it.
Okay. And you're saying something about yourself?
So yeah, so I'm not using the social media in such matter that sharing myself, which I have to
That
start
makes you
doing once again.
quite unique nowadays.
Yeah, because I left Ukrainian segment of Facebook just for various reasons, mostly because of the quality. I mean, mostly the problem, the issues were like this. First one is the topics.
No, let's not.
Topics and the way how they are discussed.
Not at this hour. We're not getting into Ukrainian social media at this hour.
So I'm saying that I think that so far maybe sometime later I'll be back in
Okay, well,
podcast.
sometime later I'll throw in a link of your preference in the description below. For now, I would like to say Jacques.
Дякую.
Yeah,
Just made it.
or spasiba, as some people here. I know you're.
Yeah, sure.
I know you're not too keen on the use of Russian, but I know you're also fluent in Russian. So
A bit.
yeah, thank you very much for participating in this
Sure.
election night broadcast, and thank you for helping out with some field research and analysis. And
Questions
we're out of time for that. They can get in touch with me, or if they want to chime in about unrelated matters, they can do so another time. But to the audience, thank you very much for joining us. This is very impromptu. I didn't announce anywhere that we're doing this live stream, although I guess at the end of my election day video today, I kind of previewed that. But maybe more of this to come on the channel. I enjoyed this feature. Thank you for participating. Thank you for watching. And once again, Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. That's a wrap from Kyiv. Good night, or it might
good
be
night.